Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar from sampling to continuous monitoring, modernizing the internal audit function. Thanks so much for joining us, whether it's morning for you or afternoon where you are. We've got a global audience today from North America to the Caribbean to Africa and Europe. As you can see in the bottom right corner of your screen, there should be a chat icon. Feel free to drop in where you're joining from. We always love to see that. I'm personally calling in from New York City and out of our office in Tribeca. And yeah, looks like we've got Annette joining from Connecticut, Celia, who's on my team, New York City, Oklahoma. So starting to see some people join from North America. That's really great. So yeah, while people gradually filter in, just a few housekeeping items. So first things first, if you run into an audio issue or a video issue, generally if you refresh the browser, it's going to fix the problem. So give that a try before trying anything else. All participants are going to be muted, but of course we still want to hear from you. So feel free to drop your questions directly in the chat as we go through today. You'll also see that there's a questions icon right next to the chat icon. Those will be delivered privately, but whichever way you ask questions, you can certainly submit them to Chifundo, Ayel, and myself throughout the session. And yeah, we'll certainly try to address as many as we can toward the end. And would highly encourage people to use the chat. Again, that should be on the bottom right-hand section of your screen. Usually that's where the best information comes from. I can see that there's already a lot of people here attending this webinar now. So when one person asks a question, then everyone else can look into it and just give their thoughts and perspectives. So one more thing, in the apps icon, it should be a drop-down of different options. One of them is links. So that's where there's going to be some additional resources. You can check out our website for more information. We also have a link to our Trust Center where you'll find our security certifications and IT FAQs. There's also a link where you can directly sign up for a product demo of Supervizor. You'll definitely see a bit of the tool in action today. But if you want to take a deeper dive into certainly applications for your team that could be relevant for your company, or just how to operationalize it based on your unique audit plan, feel free to schedule us directly. So for today's speakers, we are joined by Chifundo Biliwita. Hey, Chifundo.
Good morning, Michael.
So Chifundo is the Director of Internal Audit and Advisory Services at Ball State University. I'll ask Chifundo for an intro himself here in a second. We also have myself. I'm Michael Peterson. I'm an account executive here at Supervizor. I basically work with internal audit teams and help them buy the tool. And lastly, we have Ayel Lacrette. Hey, Ayel.
Hi, Mike. Hello, everybody.
And yeah, Ayel's also with us from Supervizor. She's a former Big Four auditor and now an audit project manager here at Supervizor, and is going to show us Supervizor and give us some insight into what it's actually used for. So we're going to kick this off with Chifundo and myself for a discussion about his professional journey, the role of audit at universities, how he's seen the role of internal audit change, and just his own team's evolution. Chifundo and I have known each other for about a year now. He's really been a great leader and driver of change at BSU and has certainly made significant advancements to how his team works. So he'll also share practical tips for how to drive that change and get support from management in doing so. Then Ayel is going to give us a demo of Supervizor. And with the time that we have left, we're going to do a Q&A. So like I said, you can put your questions in the attendee chat if you want, or the actual Q&A section. But with all that said, Chifundo, let's kick things off. So Chifundo, I'd obviously like for everyone to get to know you. So let's get them familiar. Was hoping maybe we could start with just a brief introduction. Do you mind introducing yourself, sharing a bit of background and in your current role at BSU?
Beautiful, good welcome to everyone in the audience, and thanks, Michael, for inviting me to share my experiences to other people that are looking to scale their programs or even to start from scratch. In terms of my background, I've been in this GRC internal audit space for about 15 years now, working in industries that are spanning from higher education, nonprofit, social enterprise, and public sector. And I think just in terms of the continental presence, I've worked in Africa, Europe, and here in the US. And so, in terms of higher education, unique environment, this is my close to my fifth year now. I started doing my audit work with the Eastern Illinois University, which is in Chicago, in Illinois, and then here in Indiana with Ball State University. In terms of the CAE experience, this is my seventh year at the CAE role. So I've been blessed enough to navigate being a staff auditor to managerial level to shaping the strategy. And it comes to shaping the strategy that goes into digitalization, modernization of the audit function. So I'm happy to collaborate and share my experience with the audience. Perhaps some of them are people that I look up to. I've seen readers in the audience. There are people that I've worked with before. And there are also some people that are starting their journey in the audit industry. So I'm looking forward to really addressing their needs and just sharing my experiences. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Chifundo. And yeah, so we have people joining, of course, from kind of traditional for-profit companies, also from universities and the public sector today. So maybe for those who don't know or can perhaps relate, what's the role of internal audit at a university?
Beautiful. So I think traditionally, most auditors will tell you that, when we speak to the board or internal management, often what I hear is perhaps, the common language they hear about audit is mostly compliance. So it's going to be risk-based compliance auditing. That's going to be like a default. But then, genuinely, the audit professional from the standards back then, it's always been, a combination of both typical assurance audits as well as advisory projects. Previously, that used to be termed as consulting in the audit standards. And so, however, depending on the environment and the needs of your stakeholders, when I refer to stakeholders here, I'm referring to your board at your respective institutions. The board might want you to spend more time on the compliance auditing, which is risk-based compliance auditing, or they might want you to have a really great mix of both compliance as well as advisory. I personally gravitate towards advisory because that's where really quality and improvements are made. And so here at Ball State, I think we've been blessed enough that we're given the leeway to sort of navigate moving from traditional compliance audit department to more advisory for forward-looking function.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's definitely a big trend that we're seeing in internal audit is just shifting from a compliance-oriented function and carving out that time for more advisory work. How do you balance that?
So it's a delicate balance, first and foremost, because it starts with the mindset, right? Often at times, when you are as an internal audit function being asked to get involved more in the frontline work, the biggest barrier is, what do you believe in? Where do you see the value? All right. And then the second part of it too is the standards. So there are some people that traditionally believe in the audit standards without actually thinking of why do they exist as internal auditors. So, if you're working with, face a team that strongly believes they have to be independent, objective, and don't get involved at all. So their mindset is purely on assurance. The mindset of the team itself can be a blocker in navigating that journey. And the second part is the stakeholders that we deal with, they also have a different understanding of the profession, right? There are some that do know the typical traditional internal audit function. So they're expecting to only come in when it comes to compliance and policing, right? And so when you want to sell a different idea of making sure they bet you in the process, in this case, making sure when they are deciding on things, setting up their strategy, they're making the significant changes in their operations, whether it's going to be big, major tech implementation, making them to understand they can still utilize internal audit without sort of relinquishing their managerial accountability in and ownership of the role is something that's really is a tricky, delicate balance, for lack of a better way. Now that said, he had boasted. I think what we have done was, initially was to just reintroduce internal audit 101. So going by the standards, what is internal audit? So getting people to understand the definition and what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do was the first step. Now, the second step that we needed to navigate was, folks that were traditionally used to us seeing us as compliance auditors. So every time they see the face of Chifundo or any of the team members, all they saw was we're coming in to check for compliance and not necessarily to contribute to make things work. Now, it required a lot of sharing the different perspective and having to prove the smallest low-hanging fruits in terms of the wins, right? We didn't just move in, fully and start doing the advisory. So to get into that, I think just as an example, what we did was simply start doing some projects back end, which are not solicited. And when we find something that we felt was really worthy, a high value, a sort of a mission or a high impact observation, we'll just share it as a recommendation. So we're not producing audit reports, but we'll simply say we looked at A, B, C, D, and we felt like this is something that you might want to pay attention to. Now, when the stakeholders started seeing that sort of contribution, they started now realizing that we want to contribute instead of just coming in audit for compliance and each audit reports. Largely, if based on your experience, and I think most of the audience would agree with me here, is that most stakeholders are scared of us just because they're scared of the audit report and not necessarily the message and the impact that we want to deliver.
Yeah. No, I think you made an interesting analogy there of when someone sees your name or sees your face, they want to be able to trust you. I mean, how do you make sure that the business sees you as an advisor, and kind of in that light?
So I think that's a good question. First and foremost, it starts from being candid enough to let the business know that every time they see an auditor, they should not think they have seen an expert of everything. I actually like the new update to the standard that they remove the word consulting to advisory. Much as that change has happened, truly, I think for people that have stayed in their roles for a long time, it's so hard for them to first and foremost even open the gate, open the door, or even giving a table, a seat at the table as an auditor to believe you as a consultant, right? Because that way, consultant is associated with somebody who knows it all, who knows it better than them, all right? So being humble enough to tell your stakeholders that we want to come in, when we're coming in to contribute to this process, our role is not really to show that we know it all. Really our unique skill set and value bring in the process pretty much is the fact that we have the curiosity, we have the business mindset, we have the perspective from the third floor, so we're able to connect the dots and we can ask the right questions. And more importantly, I think just having a fresh eyes look into a process or activity or results, it does sort of help to have a different opinion on some of the things. And our contribution really largely falls in that. And the third layer to it, which I think I want to emphasize on, is really just mentioning that whatever we mention as auditors in advisory capacity, it should be taken as a proposal for consideration and not really something that needs to be adopted. So I think being able to tell the business that our contribution is pretty much to look at things from that independent evaluation, fresh perspective, and that everything that we may suggest is ready for consideration and not to be adopted as it is. They do realize that we're there to contribute to them, and we're not sort of looking down on their expertise, and then we're not taking away the ownership for them to own and manage their processes.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think another thing that we've heard and we've seen is that when internal audit teams are really CAEs kind of align with other stakeholders across the organization to understand where they can provide advisory services, that also adds definitely an element of trust as well. So was curious to hear from you. How do you align your audit plan with the leadership at Ball State and make sure it's aligned with overall university goals?
Yes, I think tactical is something that we've done, and I'll tell you, it was uncomfortable even for my team. I think really it's just getting out to shake people's hands, understand, learn their operations, even if they are not in the audit plan. So I think what we've done was, first and foremost, we reach out to teams that we know were super important. Their processes, their activities, and their objectives were featured in the strategic plan. We reached out to them, just can you get us to introduce internal audit to your function? Can you let us meet your team so we know, what your teams are, what they're trying to do, what are the things that you value as your North Star, and so just building that relationship, right, for them to know they can have a conversation without judgment, sort of allowed us the room to be able to know the details behind everything that we see in terms of the reports or the data that we evaluate. And the other part to it is sort of build the business acumen. And so when it comes to the actual development of the audit plan, we have two interventions. So the first part that we did, like we said, every time you bring in internal audit, uh, in the room where people are discussing strategy, their goals and all that, people start to be reserved. Sometimes they cannot even openly and candidly discuss where they feel the failure points would be, or the barriers to the success would be. So what we did was to work with our VP, our line management here, and including collaborating with the office that does form the strategy. Now, among the questions that was within that strategy was to ask everyone that is involved with the strategic management to strategic planning to list out where they think the biggest challenges to achieving those strategies are. All right. So this was done in the time of strategic planning. And then the second part was to actually ask them what they think they would do to sort of either reduce that or mitigate that or identify that if it does happen along the way. And so we did have that information come upfront and not requested by us from internal audit. Now, the second layer that we did add in the audit planning process really is throughout the annual audit plan, which we do here, what we do is we ask for feedback uh, from all the key stakeholders, including the people that are like the champions or action owners for the strategic objectives. So we ask them, what are the things that you think would be really sort of barriers or challenges that the team will have to navigate this year? What do you think will come in the way of your objectives? So you might be, for example, changing the regulations, right? It might be things to do with uncertainty in the market. It might be things to do with resourcing. It might be things to do with just knowledge transfer, lack of documentation, and all that. So we get to hear all this and collect all that information in the interview process and risk assessment process of the audit plan. Now, the third layer that we now do internal from our internal audit is that we also sit down with a strategic plan by ourselves, sort of ignoring all the feedback that we got from these two avenues and just sort of dissect, right? Do our own research. What do we think could come in the way of these objectives? So now, by taking the pieces of feedback of insight from these three areas, we're able to align our audit plan with the strategic plan. But after doing all this analysis, considering other criteria, we do have a broader framework, approved framework for developing the audit plan here. But after approving, going through this whole risk assessment, the next layer that we also do is before we even develop the actual final audit plan, is we share it back with the senior leaders here and say, this is what we want to look at in the audit, and this is the why. All right. So, asking them to provide final insight or extra insight they might want before we can finalize the audit plan. So that's how we managed to get really the key strategic or departmental objectives in our audit plans as we develop them.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for sharing that, Chifundo. And yeah, towards to direct myself towards the audience for a minute, if you have any questions about what Chifundo is mentioning here, please don't hesitate to ask any questions in the chat or, of course, in the questions icon as well. So yeah, Chifundo, um, when you first started, how did this look different for you? Because I'm sure as a new CAE, right, you're joining a new organization where there's already tenured leadership. Do you have any tips and tricks to help build those relationships when you're getting settled into the role?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think let me start by a point of vulnerability. So, earlier on when I worked in nonprofit, I had some really great auditees. And so, for example, I'll send out my team to do some audits, and then we have when we reach a point of reporting out the results, right? There are some senior leaders that are not that were not involved in the day-to-day running of these audits, right? And so someone would come in and say, hey, we know this is a problem, but really, it doesn't shift the needle. Even if we do not fix, it doesn't change anything. So basically, what they were saying is, we're focusing on things that are low value, low impact, right? And so we're not seeing the bigger picture. And another one would come in and say, yeah, you have seen this, but I think you do not know the impact and how it connects to the entire business. So this was like really, me being a staff auditor growing up, growing in the profession, right? And so I think largely all that what was telling me was there's more to just really testing for compliance to doing all this work and reporting. Now, in terms of the unique Ball State environment, when I came in here, the first part I wanted to mention was that the audit function was largely focused on the end goal of achieving really. I mean, I'm going to say it as it was. If you look up on the website, we have not changed that yet. But the end goal, the vision for the department largely at that time was to help the university pass external audits, right? And so you would see, this was uh, really something that the stakeholders wanted at that point. It made sense. But however, this is not a truly an internal audit function. So the function was mostly spending time looking at financials, the supporting documentation, the reconciliation, which is a traditional role of the controller's office. Really, the value add was minimal. So what I did when I first came in, like I said, I think earlier on, is we first need to introduce what internal audit is, what it can do, what it cannot do, and then ask key stakeholders, internal management as well as our board, where they see the most value is. So they started to realize there's more that internal audit could do beyond just supporting the external audit function or the financial processes. So we took time to one educate the leadership, educate the board, and more importantly, even other senior operating leaders to understand that audit is not just on the financial side, but it can also be on non-financial side. In this case, you're looking at things like enrollment, you're looking at athletics, you're looking at the medical center, you're looking at research, you're looking at student finance. There's a lot that we could do beyond just supporting the financial processes. Now, it did just happen from 0 to 100. I'll tell you, the first thing that we did was we started, creating audit projects that are like sort of increase the audit in areas that are not traditionally financial. So, but the moment we started doing those audits, executing them, and bringing the results, the same VPs, senior leaders started seeing the value, and they became the allies, and they're the ones that were championing our participation in other areas.
Yeah, and I'm sure in communicating that and what internal audit is, there was probably an element also of shaping yourself as an advisor, as that was something that you're trying to balance. And I know, Chifundo, that you've always been an advocate for technology. I remember meeting you for the first time, and what really stuck with me was your push to really modernize the internal audit function at BSU. Where has technology fit into balancing compliance and advisory for you?
Beautiful. So I think the raw technology, I mean, I'll get there. I'll just maybe sort of take a step back and sort of reemphasize, what data can do. I think from the professional, from the traditional typical auditors that are here, in the audience, we have heard about data analytics, and its value in internal audit for a long time. When I was just coming in the audit profession back then, about 15 years ago, we've had ACL, we heard really programs that were supporting the audit analytics. Now that said, to today, I think it was like maybe a year, or if it's not 6 months ago, I saw a report that still technology adoption and data literacy has been an issue in the profession. Now, that speaks to a couple of things, right? The first part is because we are auditors, we're not trying, we're not willing to try and fail, right? And the second part to it is the fact that we want to do it all, which is not necessarily the case, because if you're looking at modern CAEs now, people that are holding the CA positions right now, most of them really were trained and they became auditors before all this big data came in, all this big technology, all this software as a service came in. All right. So, when I came in here, the first thing that I looked at was the resourcing. There was appetite to sort of increase productivity, but at the same time, they're not willing to add more headcount, additional headcount to the team. So the only way to balance their needs and achieve the same outcome was to deploy technology. So that's when I started looking at what are the things in the audit process that we can automate. What are the things in the audit process that we do not need to utilize professional judgment. So I think like you mentioned earlier on, my interest in the data for the largest part was more so from a confidence level. Speaking in mass language, if you're thinking of your audits and you've come out with really an exception, an opportunity for improvement, and you bring it to an auditee. In this case, maybe a stakeholder says, but you looked at 20 transactions, I have 10,000 transactions. Often the time that question the confidence that you have in that. All right. And then the second part is, in environments of where we have big data now, you're talking about really, lots of transactions. And so having a team of 4 or 5 people to do this work, and most importantly, using their professional judgment, is like really asking them to find a needle in a haystack. And so that's when my appetite for having to deploy technologies that analyze data uh, it came in. So that's where I started building a business case for can we build data analytics programs from the scratch, or can we have a software as a service? In this case, we're lucky enough to partner with you as supervisor in our role. But really largely when we started building the business case, I think it was a bit difficult, because there was still skepticism around it, because not so sure, if we have people from higher education in the audience, but we are a banner environment. And so Banner is an enterprise resource planning solution that was not meant for modern day data analytics. So it's very hard to extract data and really have a plug and play solution. So it required a lot of conversation, a lot of building relationships with the business. In this case, data admins, people from the our information technology office, to really just understand what data is available, what data elements are they capturing, and how can we utilize that to support the audit. And so in building that connection and setting out the business case why we wanted to access that data, and proving to them that we're not just accessing that data and exposing it to any wrong parties or bad actors. I think that was a big point. And I think what we did was, after we managed to build the allies, and that's when we had IT supporters, we had people from the finance office supporters, we had people from the student side of the business supporters in our quest for data analytics journey. So with all these 4 partners on our side, I think this was what made it easier for the leadership and the board to believe it's really the right time to invest in the right technology. And so with that, what we did was we were able to outline what are the audits we can do going forward with technology, so we can have more precision, more confidence that we are moving from sampling into more 100% population testing. And that sort of really give us that a talking point, for the lack of a better words, to be able to convince skeptics to support the gen that we wanted to invest in.
Yeah. And in that shift from sampling to leveraging more data and doing full population testing, how did the team adapt to that?
Yeah, again, it was such a learning curve. I mean, I can speak maybe in 2 fronts. The first front is, when I just started in our environment here, we already have a data analytics team, right? However, the style of data analytics team that they were doing as an institution was purely on the academic side of the house, and it was not financial data. All right. And so when we just started, the first barrier was this team really did not want to let us in. They kept feeling that they could execute it all by themselves. All right. And so when we gave them that opportunity to give it a go, eventually, maybe after like 3 or 4 months, they came back and said they couldn't really do the analytics that we wanted to do, because surely, like you say, their unique expertise was data management, data governance, but on non-financial data or academic side of data. Now, that was one. And the second part is within the internal audit team itself, right? And so I think really this is something that I share a lot and I've heard a lot, and I think most of you in the audience you might have heard it a lot. I think 21st century, really to be a great auditor, you need to have the data literacy. All right, so you do not need to know how to code, but you must have the curiosity to understand what data do you need, what problems can you solve using data, what data is sitting in your institution, in what form, and how can you access it on in an ongoing basis. Now, this is something that we had to take time to train our team, have conversation, and making sure that in each and every audit, before we even start doing the testing, we ask ourselves, what part of the audit can we utilize data, and where can we get this data, and in what form, what elements of the data do we need? So having this upfront in the audit planning process and making it be part of the day-to-day process for each and every audit was one way to shift the culture internally. Now, the second part to it uh, was uh, speaking on the stakeholder part was the fact that, like I said, we build the relationships with the business, in this case, our IT, the data management team, but still there was hesitancy in making us have this access on an ongoing basis. Now, what we simply did was to embed them in the process. So, for example, for anything that we wanted to build on analytics, we'll tell them why we want to do it, let them build an analytics program with whilst they're participating in it, and see the results that we see upfront. And I think that's where uh, when I first get in touch with you and during the implementation of our supervisor audit analytics program, what we did is you saw folks from purchasing team, you saw folks from the IT team, you saw people that were from accounts payable team. The goal was I wanted them to have the visibility in, in what we're trying to do, what sort of tests we're trying to do in the data, and what results we're seeing. Because really it's a win-win situation with them seeing the results and working on solving those problems even outside the audit cycle. And that's why I think that was the biggest strategy that helped us to navigate the access to the data and being given the access on an ongoing basis. Really, by just having them to be part of the process was what I think was the biggest success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like those were always great conversations. I got to meet so many people at Ball State. Um, when it comes to data literacy, embedding data in your audits, building an analytics program, where did Supervisor actually fit into the picture for you?
Yeah, so largely, again, this is not a plug, and thanks for asking that. This is probably a third data analytics program I've had to roll out in different institutions. Uh, One thing I'll tell you is often at times as auditors, we want to try with building things internally. And the challenge we face with that is one, the data we need might not be in the format and that we want to process it. It might not be easy to access. It might need a little band-aid or crossworks to do it. And then the other part is the people that we're either trying to ask to help us build the programs. Either if you're blessed enough to be in a well-resourced function, then you have a scientist or a data analyst in your team. I mean, that sort of helps. But really, it takes a significant investment to build a program up and running from the ground up. And now the second part to it that you face is maintaining that program because every time that I tried to build and hire a data analyst, once I taught them and they had the experience, there was the next guy who was trying to hire them. So it was a vicious cycle of building the skill set up, have a program, somebody dumps it, and so that was way difficult to get things up to skill. Now the third layer to it is the technology is changing. Now we're talking about AI and all that. And so to be able to maintain a program which is homegrown, I think largely it was difficult because it requires not just investing time in the audit resources and managing the program, but you also want to keep up with the technology advancement that are happening in the industry. And that's where I convinced our leadership that we need to have a third party, in this case, supervisor, come in our environment and partner with us to be able to do this. So then what's happening is our focus is mostly on the data quality, where this data is being created, processed, and refined, for reporting. And then we let the advancement analytics being done by a solution like yours. So that was really, I think, something sort of I would call a productivity multiplier. But more importantly, also the fact that we got our precision to the highest level of confidence as we want it to be.
Yeah. Chifundo, I see we're running up on our time, but I did want to ask you one more question. So obviously what you're describing is a shift not only from sample-based testing to full population testing, but also ad hoc data analysis to analyzing data more frequently. Um, in my experience, I've seen other CAEs get challenged by the first line in terms of getting their buy-in to actually support those more frequent continuous monitoring efforts. How did you get their support?
Beautiful. My philosophy in audit is that, quality cannot be audited in, it has to be embedded. It has to be part of the process. And so, where I see impact in terms of audit, other than really traditional compliance, is we want to help teams to build their compliance program. We want to help teams to be able to test their own programs activities for compliance. We want to help teams to be able to look at their own transactions, test them for integrity and confidence. All right. And so, while this is something that's traditional, most audit functions don't look at as a value, right? It's different from me celebrating this as an achievement. If I'm just going in there as an auditor who's looking to have an audit report with all sorts of findings. So, what we did here, technically, the first part was to convince the business that we want them to be part of the data analytics journey. All right, and the reason is, while we may not have the opportunity as an audit team with a 4 or 5 month job to be looking at this transaction on a daily basis, they will have the same visibility, the same access that we do have, and they have the ability to look at the exceptions and fix them before an audit happens. All right. And so that's something that is of value to them, because by the time we identify exceptions, right, in coming and start asking them, most of these are already being fixed ahead of time. All right, which is for us where the impact is. They're able to identify things closer to real time, and mostly real time, and they're able to fix us before time for an audit comes in. And so by the time we do the audit, we're just validating what they did to resolve those issues. Now, the second part is because of that, already we have built the trust. All right. They know that we have these programs not to catch them, but to help them improve their own processes and avoid, for the lack of a better word, internal audit findings. And largely, the end goal is to not have an external audit finding, which is going to be public facing. And so I think the ability to embed them in the process makes them understand that whatever we're doing is really to build quality in their own processes, to be able for them to have the confidence, for them to have trust in their own data, in their own process and their outcomes, and to be able to make those intelligent decision-based, evidence-based data or data-based decisions with utmost confidence. Having an analytics software be part on their day-to-day basis was one of the things that we felt could help. And it's something that largely has helped us to build a great network of allies here on campus. But I think more importantly, the other part that we've also seen is that now there are teams that were not in our traditional audit analytics program. They are now coming to us asking if we can get to incorporate them in our audit analytics program, because they are seeing the value that other teams are seeing. The ability to see the same views, things that they never thought of, and they're able to catch these things upfront and be able to fix them before we come in as our auditors.
Yeah, all great insights there, Chifundo. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Of course, really appreciate you taking the time. Please stick around just for questions at the end, and everyone who's attending, please feel free to kind of ask your questions in the chat. We'd now like to move on to the demo. So I'm going to start with just a few slides sharing how Supervizor's technology works, and then I'll hand it over to IL. So yeah, during my time at Supervizor, I've seen firsthand that while many audit teams are trying to use analytics and have started to some degree, very few of those teams are using it at an advanced level. And a lot of the challenges revolve around what Chifundo is describing, just managing data quality, managing data from many systems, might be limited data access, but also in lots of cases, we run into teams, right, with limited resources, skill gaps. In nearly every case, audit teams that go through this process of building an analytics program go through significant trial and error before their analytics create good, accurate results. And at Supervizor, that's really the gap that we're trying to bridge. So in terms of what it is, it's an audit analytics platform. it comes with over 350 pre-built routines that are directly applicable to any ERP to really enable teams to perform continuous full population testing without necessarily needing to build routines in-house to accomplish the same goal. So everything comes as pre-built and ready to deploy quickly, and making analytics, accessible and practical for audit teams of any size. This is a snapshot of how it works. So as an analytics solution, everything's going to start with ingesting data. So for market-leading ERPs like SAP and Oracle, we offer plug-and-play API connections, which automatically pull all of the right data from those systems needed to run the routines that we offer. For other systems, even homegrown or legacy, we can support automated imports through an SFTP, or data can just be uploaded manually for ad hoc analysis. Now, once the data is ingested, our platform automatically cleans and normalizes your data using underlying algorithms, which is what allows our customers to truly run these routines continuously without any data preparation. It also means for companies with multiple ERPs that they can standardize these routines and analyze data the same way across multiple systems. So yeah, once the data is standardized, the controls run at your chosen frequency, whether that's monthly for a more proactive stance to risk detection, or on an audit per audit basis, just at the push of a button. And once the controls are run, anomalies are flagged for review in the platform. And there's a number of ways to visualize the findings and drill down into them, which you'll see in the demo momentarily. Hundreds our hundreds of routines are organized into modules over different business processes. For example, records to report, treasury, order to cash, procure to pay, user activity, T&Es, and P cards. Many of these controls within these modules are rule-based, so detecting anomalies as different layers of conditions are broken. We've also made significant strides in incorporating AI into our controls for outlier detection to really further enable teams to find anomalies in their data. Outside of what you can see here, we're actively developing new modules with routines over inventory coming soon. And we're continuously adding to the areas that you see here, just based on client feedback and co-creation. I'd say procure to pay is a very popular module. The controls are designed to help audit teams really improve supplier relations, improve working capital efficiency, and just overall improve the purchasing process, which really sticks with the first line. So for the demo today, we'll show a couple examples of controls in procure to pay and also T&E. And yeah, I guess on that note, Ayel, that's it for my part. I'll hand it over to you to jump into the demo.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Share my screen quickly. All right. So thank you. My name is Ayel. I am a former auditor. I also work with Chifundo and his team to deploy Supervizor at Ball State University. Today, I'm going to walk you through how Supervizor can help internal audit teams automate their testings and monitoring. Quick disclaimer, the data that you will see today is demo data. It is not Ball State's, but it will give you a clear idea of what Supervizor could look like for your own team. Starting from the dashboard view, here you can see your KPIs and overall control results across processes. It's especially useful for management or audit leaders who may not have the time to deep dive into the results, but want a clear picture of what is going on. So we can go on to the global view from that point. Over here. Here is your main workspace where all of your controls are listed and refreshed either ad hoc or on a monthly basis, depending on your business need. Each line represents a control that was ran on your data. Opening up the filtering pane, just to explain a little bit what you can see on the screen, you can see that we have three different types of conclusion. Okay, meaning that Supervizor ran the control over your data and found no anomalies for that time period. That's a good sign and provides a bit of peace of mind, but it doesn't guarantee result will always be okay. I typically recommend monitoring these for changes. And in blue, we have the information controls, which provide insights or statistics on your data. Very useful for spotting trends. Lastly, in red, we have the anomalies, which are potential issues flagged by supervisor for investigation. Closing out of that, we are now back on the main view where you can see the control name. And hovering over the control will open up this black box, which contains a brief description as well as the source data to help you have a better understanding of what the control does. Then next to it, you'll also see the tags that helps you filter the controls by business processes like P2P in this example, which also corresponds to the modules that Mike mentioned earlier. Next to the tag, you then see the number of results associated with each control as well as the related financial impact. So overall, the global view really helps teams pinpoint where their attention is needed and assign work and also track the investigation process. Today, as Mike mentioned earlier, we'll focus on P2P and T&E, as many higher ed institutions tend to start here because these areas typically handle large transaction volume and are prone to compliance or process risk. So first up is P2P, which runs on your general ledger and accounts payable data. For example, at Ball States, it runs on Banner, but Supervisor works with multiple ERP systems like Oracle, SAP, and others. In this module, we typically monitor risk across the purchase process from PO to payment and including related risk. We have around 70 automated checks in P2P, but I'll just show a few examples for today. So typically when people think of data analytics, they tend to think of duplicates, which is what we're going to start with today. So we'll start with duplicate purchase invoices with identical amount and reference numbers. Clicking on the control will open up that view that contains all the findings with a bit of a summary. In order to investigate, you click on a finding, which will open up the source data at the bottom, meaning you don't have to leave Supervisor in order to investigate. Everything you need is right here. No need to go back and forth between your ERP system. So let's take a closer look at this example. As you can see over here, we have an entry that was posted on the AP journal with the supplier being Costco, and I posted on 1028 as well. It's also for 53K with this external reference number. Then let's say we have an employee who then, unaware that this automated entry was already done, posted an entry on a miscellaneous journal. Again, same supplier, Costco, on the 1028 with for 53K and with the same external reference number, with the exception of the slash and the dash in the first set of external reference. What likely happened here is that the automated system processed the invoice first, and then an employee who wasn't aware that it had already been posted created a manual entry on a miscellaneous journal. So supervisor is catching those duplicates, even though they're posted on different journals and with slightly different external reference numbers. While being on the topic of duplicates, another example relates to duplicate purchase invoices with similar reference numbers. So here, this follows a similar pattern. It's looking for duplicates, but with a fuzzy match. Just as this example over here, you can see there is an 8 and a B. Maybe the machine, the scanning system misread the 8 as a B. And also, I want to bring your attention to the amount of result that we have in this control. Supervisor is a tool that really help you focus your attention where it matters most, which is why we have this priority feature that assigns a risk-based score to the findings, helping you focus. So we're going to try that right now and filter for level 4, which really greatly reduce the amount of findings that you have to look at. We can also collaborate right in Supervisor, add comments, add attachments, and track the status of the investigation. Just pivot a little bit. Now, going on to a control over payments, clicking on that control. You have different findings. Here, the control is looking for any invoices that could qualify for early payment discount. In this example, you can see that the expected payment term is 10 days, but the invoice was actually paid in 8 days, meaning that it qualifies for a 1% discount. Really here, this is having all of these cases listed in one place really helps teams optimize their working capital. Lastly, for P2P, we're going to take a look at one of our control in related to purchase invoices. This control identifies all invoices that are over a certain threshold but do not have an associated PO. As you can see, maybe a manager might agree for a vendor service without going through procurement. And an invoice will be sent for, let's say, 100K without appeal. So without this control, that invoice could get paid, resulting in non-compliance. So this control is made to be comfortable so you can set your own threshold to reinforce your own procurement compliance and reduce unauthorized spendings. So overall, the P2P module really helps audit team monitor the PO cycle, ensure compliance, and reduce cash leakage all automatically. Now scrolling down to the T&E module, this module runs on the expense report data and also includes PICO data, which many universities rely on. It also allows you to monitor employees and cut expenses all in one place. So similarly to the duplicate control that we looked at in P2P, we can take a look at the duplicate control that is looking for any expense report that were submitted with this on the same date with the same supplier and the same amount, but this time with different employees. So the scenario is that maybe two employees went out for lunch and they both expensed the full amount. So this control is flagging those instances to help prevent over reimbursements. This kind of control can be pretty useful. Now we're going to pivot a little bit to some of the controls over keywords, which is expense reports that may reveal the use of unauthorized software. So this control is rule-based. It is looking for specific keywords in your expense descriptions. It helps detect IT, such as software subscriptions that were purchased outside of, approved channels. For example, ChatGPT. I say a company doesn't allow its employees to use ChatGPT, but then this control will show whether or not any employee expense for that kind of software. And also in our experiences, many companies often buy enterprise-wide licenses for software such as Canva, but still see employees expensing individual licenses, which over time can really add up. Catching these really helps strengthen IT governance and eliminate redundant cost. Now moving on to a control over AI. So really, this control is taking a look at your entire population and grouping them into different clusters and using a Canon algorithm flagging for outliers, like this unusually, give me a second over here. This control is looking at your entire population and flagging for outliers using a Canon algorithm. So if we take a look at this relocation for dog, which is for almost 10K, we can see that is pretty unusual, and compared to your data, it's is an anomaly. So we also powered this control with AI, with GenAI capabilities, which will give you an explanation of why each item was flagged. And you can see over here, it is unusually high cost for international pet relocation. Can be pretty useful for our users. So closing out of that, to summarize it overall, Supervisor really help the internal audit teams. You can move from high-level KPI dashboard all the way to the individual source entries all in one platform. It helps your internal audit team automate all those repetitive tasks and focus on meaningful risk, and as well as collaborating efficiently without building or maintaining any scripts. So thank you for paying attention, Mike.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ayel. I take it that that concludes the short demo for today. Yeah, so we wanted to give you a flavor of what's in Supervisor. If, of course, you'd like to schedule a more in-depth demo, you can do that by going into the links icon and clicking the link to book a demo. But yeah, wanted to conclude things here with some Q&A. Chifundo, I see that we have a handful that have come through in the private channel. So I'll just ask away. So this one's directed, I believe, towards you, Chifundo. What incremental assurance and value does 100% testing deliver versus sampling, and how have you measured that success?
Beautiful. That's a great question. So I think it starts from really the confidence level. All right. So if I, as an auditor, the first thing I want to do is eh, everything that I raise out and include in an audit report as a finding. If somebody was to sort of really, for the lack of a better way, challenge it, all right, and say, well, yes, it's a finding, but you were just lucky. It's out of luck that you chanced on this. This does not apply to, all the things that we do, or this is not an outlier. How do you have the confidence to really challenge that, or how do you counter that sort of challenge? And so by having, 100% population testing, you're able to really stand on your findings and anything that you report with the highest level of confidence that you have looked at everything and really that's what it represents. The other part is, it depends on the use case. If you're looking in a world which is sort of zero tolerance for fraud, all right. If you're looking for just one single transaction for that had an occurrence of fraud, yeah, that makes sense that you can go with the sampling, but really the chances of you getting that in a haystack is way too low, right? And so by having the technology and you're testing the type of measure, that gives you an opportunity to demonstrate with all confidence that you have looked at everything and this truly based on the attributes that you're looking for, the high risk attributes you're looking for, at least you can confirm with confidence that either fraud is occurring or not occurring. In same, and the other part is in terms of the value earned, again, it depends on the stakeholders and how you sell this. All right. And so if let's say, the biggest tension point here is the board, which very largely is looking for just an independent opinion, and then management, which is looking to make sure the housekeeping is good and bad things don't come out, right? And so depending on where these stakeholders are, you can demonstrate value over time. So for example, if you're looking at internal stakeholders, lately the ability to catch things upfront, or closer to real time as they happen and get them fixed before the time of the audit, really, I think that does help to prevent any, for the lack of a better word, audit findings from being raised, be it internal or external audit. And the second part is if there are any compliance issues that come out from those data analytics, then anything that is related to compliance, you can confirm that it's not happening. Now, the other part is, as you mentioned, in terms of demonstrating the value over a long term. Surely, I think where I see this going forward is by having automated controls and having a collaboration, strengthening the collaboration between the first, second line, and the first line. I think what would normally happen then is you reduce the cycle of audits in those areas where you know for sure the first line and the second line have taken advantage and they're looking at this on a daily basis. Then you're sort of taking the resource that you're freeing up in doing this mundane, repetitive transaction monitoring and testing and focusing on other strategic and impactful areas of the audit. So you can demonstrate value by the number of, the bandwidth that you're freed up and to focus on other audits that are not traditionally testing based.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for sharing that. I see we only have 1 minute left, so I'll stick to a shorter question. And then for all of you who asked questions and we didn't get to them, we can certainly follow up with you. But I'm going to direct this to you, IL. Can you build or customize routines in Supervisor?
Yes, of course. You can definitely build and customize routines in Supervisor. One of the examples that I showed earlier with the invoice over $10,000 of purchase orders, you're able to customize that for your own threshold, let's say $2,000 or over if you wanted to do that. You can also create custom routines as well in Supervisor. That is definitely something that we can do.
Okay, great. Well, Ayel, Chifundo, thanks so much for participating in this. I see that we're pretty much up on time. So I also wanted to use this last minute to just say thanks to everyone for joining. I hope you found this interesting, and we'll certainly follow up with the recording if you'd like to share it with more of your team. But that concludes our session today, and everyone have a great rest of your day.